Hello, and today I'm going to take you through how to use Adobe InDesign. Now, if you are a complete beginner and have never used Adobe InDesign before, then this tutorial is for you. If you've used Adobe Photoshop before or Adobe Illustrator, I will be making references throughout this tutorial on what shortcuts are different and how certain things might function, although I may not be referencing all of them. So first off, what is Adobe InDesign? Adobe InDesign is a layout program. So think, book covers or book interiors, posters, magazines, that sort of thing. That is what Adobe InDesign is geared towards. So Photoshop is fantastic for photo editing, Illustrator, fantastic for vectors, and then those both will feed into InDesign, which will be generally the last step where you put all of your beautiful work together in a lovely layout. So let's get started. First I'll turn on my shortcuts, there we go. First we're going to go to New File up here. Now I've used InDesign quite a bit, so my recent is filled with lots of different things, but yours might be empty. For this tutorial we're going to start off in the Print tab here, where you'll find some sizes that might be a little bit more familiar for you. So I'm going to click View All Presets. For this tutorial, I'm going to be using an A4 preset, but it truly does not matter what size you're using. We're always going to want to name our document, because when we don't, InDesign will go Untitled 1, and then a new one will be Untitled 2, Untitled 3, and that can get really confusing if you have a bunch of new documents open at once. So we always want to name our documents here. For units, it defaults to picas, but this is not a unit of measurement I use. This is more of a typographical measurement, so I'm going to switch that to 2 centimeters. I'm going to make my document landscape, but this doesn't really matter. I'm going to turn off facing pages. In this tutorial, we're not going to be working with multi-page documents, and in a future tutorial, I will go over what those are. For columns, we will leave that at 1, because 1 column effectively means no columns. Margins we're just going to leave as default, and we're also not going to touch the bleed and the slug. This might be collapsed for you. So the bleed is the excess that you print on the edge of the page that will get trimmed off by a printer, so you get beautiful borderless printing, and then the slug is going to be any printer information that also gets trimmed off. So with all of that, I'm going to click Create. And before I get started, I'm going to reset my workspace. Now I'm working in the Essentials workspace, so as you can see up here, so I'm just going to go Reset Essentials. And this should be what your workspace looks like. Now, some tutorials might use the Essentials Classic workspace, which you can find right underneath Essentials. So if I switch to that, you'll see there's a lot more information on the screen. I prefer to work in Essentials when I'm teaching, but as you work through and use Adobe InDesign more and more, you will develop your own workspace, and you can create new workspaces that are laid out with all of the windows open that you would like. So I've got my rulers on. You probably won't have those on. I'm just going to turn those off, but that's where you can turn those on. But I just want my screen to look as close to what yours looks like as possible. So first up, on the far left, we have our toolbar. So this is where you're going to find all of the mouse tools that you'll be using. So we're always going to default to this one up here. This is called the selection tool. Now throughout the tutorial, I'll probably be referring to it as the move tool. That's easier for me, and it helps differentiate these two tools, because this one is the selection tool and then this one is the direct selection tool. So I prefer to refer to this one as the move tool and then this one as the direct selection tool. So we have all of our tools down here. We also have color, so if you're familiar with Photoshop and Illustrator, this will look very familiar. Now on the far right, we have the Properties panel. If you don't have the Properties panel open, this is something I'm going to be using a lot. To get it open, you can go Window and then find Properties, and that will get it open for you. You do not need to be in the same workspace as me to have any of the windows open. The Properties panel is a contextual panel, so it changes depending on what tool I'm using or what I have selected. So right now I don't have anything selected, so it's showing me my document properties. So we've got like my size, how many pages I have, my margins, page I'm on, everything. So that's what it's currently showing me is my documents properties. Now we have a few extra tabs up here, but we're going to ignore those at the moment, and we're just going to focus on our main document. Now we can't really do anything right now because there's nothing on our screen, so the first thing I'm going to get you to do is add a shape. So we're going to go and find a rectangle tool. The shortcut for that is M, or we can find it underneath this one that has a cross through it. Now mine looks like this because I've got multiple tools here. But there we go, rectangle tool, so it's underneath this one with a cross in it and above the scissors, or you can use the shortcut M to get to it. Now in Photoshop, M is the shortcut for the marquee tool, the selection tool, rectangular selection tool, whereas in Illustrator, M is also for the rectangle tool. So we can click and drag to make our shape, and I can hold Shift to keep it perfectly proportional. So that's how we're going to make it perfectly square. And if I hold Option or Alt and I resize, it resizes from the center. I'm going to let go of that one. So I'm just holding Shift, makes it perfectly square. So I'll let go of my mouse. Now, for those of you who are on a computer, it might be a little bit difficult to navigate around InDesign. So I am on my trackpad, so I can move around very easily. If you are on a computer, you can hold spacebar, and that will turn your cursor into this little grabby guy, and you can just grab your document and move around. And when you let go of spacebar, your tool will return to what it was. To zoom in and out, you can hold Alt or Option, and you can just use your scroll wheel to move around. And then if you don't like that, sometimes that can also cause computers to lag. You can also use Command or Control and hit plus and minus. Now on my shortcuts that shows up as equals, but that is plus and minus keys. So we have our shape here, and I'm just going to switch to our Move tool. So this one, the shortcut is V. And right now our shape doesn't have any colors in it at all, and this can make it actually pretty hard to move it around. So you might have to grab it directly on the edge to be able to move it because you can't grab it in the center. So it gets very hard to be precise with it. Now we can add a color either by clicking in our properties panel. We have fill, and this gives us a lot of preset swatches. Or we can double click on this front one here and we get a color picker. So we can move that around to choose whatever color we want. I click OK. And now our shape has a color. In Photoshop, you might be familiar with this being the foreground and then this one being the background. But for those of you who are used to Adobe Illustrator, you'll be a little bit more comfortable because it's the exact same. So our top one is our fill, and the bottom one here is our stroke, which means the outline. So we can add a color to our stroke the same way. We can double click on that. We could move it around, pick a color. And so now our shape has a fill color and a stroke or an outline. By clicking on the shape, you see our properties panel changes, and we can change some things to the appearance. So our fill we can't do too much with, but with our stroke we could change the thickness here. I can tick that up. And we can also change the type with this drop down here. So right now it's solid, but I could change that to thick, and that's 2 thick lines going all around. Could change it to thick, thin, and there's some other options there. We can also do a little bit more with our stroke. So we can click on the word stroke here. You can see that it's underlined. So if I click on that word, we get more options. So we still have the weight, which is the same as this, and then we have the type, which is the same drop down as before. But now we have a few more options. So I can change the joins to make it have some rounded corners for the stroke. I could change where it aligns, so I can line it to the inside. You can line it to the outside, so you can see this here is our shape. And then this one was aligned centered. So you could see when I increased that size, our shape did get smaller visually. And then this is the actual border of our shape. So the stroke is an equal amount on either side of the side of our shape. Let's put that down to a little bit more of a reasonable number. I'll click on the word stroke again. And we have some more options, but they don't really work on a square because it's a closed shape. So we have cap here, and then we also have start and end. Now, because this is a shape, it doesn't have a start and an end, so I'll show you how to use those a bit later. Down here we have corner, so we can change the corner of our shape if we want to. So we've got this drop down, I could make it rounded. And that rounds the actual corners of the shape there. We've got some other options. We could do a bevel or an inset, inverse rounded, so we have some options there. If we click on the word corner, we bring up this dialog box and we can actually make changes to our corners individually. So we have this button in the middle here, this little chain link one, and yours might be ticked on and it'll look like that. Now if that is the case, then it's still going to change all 4 corners at once. You want to make sure preview is ticked on so you can see the changes you're making, and that will do the exact same as before. However, if we tick this off, now we can only change one at a time if we want to. And so we can have different corners on all of them. We can also increase the size of the individual corners if we want to, and make some interesting shapes. So I'll click OK on that one. And then down here we of course have the opacity. Now you can see that this has gone empty, and that's because our corners have different values. So we can't make global changes to the shape anymore, but we can still click on that corner word and change them individually if we want to. So that's squares. Let's make another shape. So the next shape we're going to make is a circle or an ellipse. Now to get to that, it's either the shortcut L, or we can long press on our rectangle tool or right click it, and that will give us our options here. Same thing as before, we can click and drag to make an oval shape. We can hold Shift to make it perfectly circular, and we can hold Option or Alt and that will resize it from the center. So I'm going to let go to make my circle. Now I'm going to show you a few more tricks with color with this shape, because I feel like it will be a bit redundant to go over the same options we did with this one. So as you can see here, we still have no color. Now you can hit D on your keyboard and that will give us a default appearance. Now this is the same shortcut as it is in Photoshop and in Illustrator, but it is a bit different. So in Photoshop what it will do is it will give you a white foreground and a black background. In Illustrator, it will give you a white fill and a black stroke. And in InDesign, as you can see here, it's giving us no fill and a black stroke. So that's just a really quick way of getting your shape to something you can see. Now, a few more tricks with color. We can toggle which one we're editing by clicking X on our keyboard. You can see that brings whatever one we want to the front. It just swaps them around. We can swap our fill and our stroke around by using the shortcut Shift X. So that's now put my stroke onto my fill, Shift X again, and puts it back onto the stroke. So that's just swapping them around. So there are some quick ways to get color to your shape. Now some other quick shortcuts. So I'm just going to hit X to make sure I'm doing my fill. We can remove color by hitting slash. So that's the color gone by. We can add in color again by hitting comma, so that just puts your last used color back into the shape. And then full stop is going to add a gradient to your shape. So slash, no color, full stop, gradient, comma, solid color. And it'll be your last used color. Now, all of these are available as not shortcuts as well. So down here, this one here, we have a default fill and stroke. We can click that. It gets us back to there. We have swap fill and stroke around, so that will swap it for you. If you click on the stroke, it will bring it to the front. Same with the fill, so you don't need to hit X if you don't want to. And then if we click on this here, the long press on it, we have apply color, apply gradient, and apply none. So you can see comma, full stop, and slash. So all of these have our shortcuts on them. But using shortcuts can make things a lot faster for making these sorts of shapes. So last time, that's X to change what one you're editing, Shift X to swap your fill and your stroke around, slash to remove color, full stop to add a gradient, and a comma to add a solid color. So I'm going to go back to the Move tool, shortcut V for that. I'm going to put my circle off to the side there. Now I'm going to make a polygon now. So once again, we can long press or right click on our circle or ellipse tool, go to our polygon tool, and we can click and drag to draw. Now mine's a bit different because I've changed the settings around. So I'm actually just going to delete that. We can change our settings very easily by double clicking on this and choosing how many sides we want and a star inset. Now, if you're familiar with Adobe Illustrator, you'll know that the polygon tool and the star tool are two separate things, but with InDesign, they're the same. So if I put star inset to 0, and let's say I want 5 sides, and then I click and drag, it's like a normal polygon shape. So we have that. Once again, Shift keeps it proportional, Option or Alt will resize it from the center. But I want to show you another trick. And the trick is that we can add multiple shapes to our screen at once if we want to. So in InDesign, you're going to use the up key to add shapes vertically. You're going to use the right arrow key to add shapes horizontally. And then you can use the reverse to minus them. So left key will remove shapes, and then the bottom key will also remove shapes. So we can add a whole lot of shapes if we want to. Now, this is where things can get a little bit finicky and you'll need a lot of fingers available to do this, but we can remove that gap between our shapes. So this gap here is determined by the gutter settings that we have when we set up our document, which we didn't worry about, but you can still remove these manually. So we're going to hold Command or Control, and then you're going to tap the bottom arrow key, and you can't hold it down, you have to continuously tap it. And then the left arrow keys, and then that will bring them together. And once that's done, we can hold Shift if we want to keep them proportional, but I do find it's easier to let go of Shift while you're doing that. So if I let go of these, we've now created a whole bunch of shapes on our document at once. If I hit D, they now all have a default color. I'm going to go back to the Move tool, so that's V for that, and if I let go, so just click off, these are all separate shapes and I can move them however I want. But this is great if you need to do something that involves a lot of shapes at once. So I'm just going to delete those, and that one, and that one. And now we're going to talk a little bit about frames in InDesign. So frames are placeholders for certain aspects in InDesign, such as images. And frames allow us to plan our layout without having all of our content ready. So right above the shape tool is this one. This is our frame tool. So if I click on that and I click and drag, you'll see it's very similar to the rectangle, but it has a cross through it. So this is our frame, and we can insert anything into this if we want to. So I'm going to go back to the Move tool. I'm going to right click on this, and you can see content is assigned to graphic. That's what the default is when you use the frame tool. but we could change it to text if we want to, and if we change it to unassigned, it's essentially a rectangle now that we can do everything a rectangle does with. But because it's graphic, it has this cross through it. Now, just like with the shape tool, when we hold this down, we have a lot of options in here. So we've got our circle, and then we've got our polygon frame tool. And the polygon frame tool is the same, where you can have set number of sides and set the star inset. But for now, let's insert an image into this frame. So over here, I have prepared an image. And I'm just going to drag and drop that onto my frame. Now you can also go File and then find Place to place your image, and that will work as well. It will work exactly the same. So here we are, we've got our image in here. Now our image is within this frame. If I resize my frame, it's just going to crop my image. And this is because frames work very differently to how you expect images to work in Adobe InDesign. So with this, we've got the circle in the middle, and this circle here will allow us to make edits to that image within the frame. So if I click on that, you'll see we get this orange outline around here. Now that is our frame. Our image within our frame. We can move that around if we want to reposition it in the frame. And if you want to see it while it's outside of the frame, you can click and hold, and you'll get this grayed out version so you can see exactly what you're positioning within your frame. So this can be a very useful layout tool. And it can be very helpful when you're needing to crop images or reveal them. But sometimes you want to resize your image and your frame together. Now, to resize your image, you totally could just click on this and resize this as normal. So hold Shift to keep it proportional, and you can make it smaller if you want to. So I'm going to undo that, Command Z. But to resize your image and your frame together, we're going to hold Shift, which will keep it proportional, and Command or Control, which will make them resize together. So if we just hold Command or Control, we would be, stretching our image, because we'd just be resizing our frame and our image without taking into consideration keeping it proportional. So lovely use frames, but they do take some getting used to. So keep that in mind. And if it's not super intuitive, don't blame yourself. It's more than fine. So frames are very, very powerful, but like I said, very difficult. So let's get some text in here. I'm not going to go too in depth on all of the type options in Adobe InDesign. Some are just mind-blowingly amazing, but we'll go for a light cover today, and maybe in a future tutorial I'll go much more in depth on the type tools. So grab the type tool here, and it's just this lovely T. Shortcut for it is T, so that one is logical. Now we can click and drag to make a text box for us. And so now we have a text box, and our properties panel has changed, though yours might look something like this. There we go. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this with some lorem ipsum, and InDesign very kindly does that for us. So we can right click on this and find Fill with Placeholder Text. Now, I'm going to erase this last paragraph just for formatting purposes so we can see what we're doing. And I'm just going to hit return here to make this one like a title. So we have some text in our text box, but we want to format it. Right now this is looking very boring. So I can highlight some text, and over here in the character part of the properties panel, I can change the font. So I can change that to whatever I want. Helvetica is usually a safe bet. I can change the styling of it. So I could say I want it to be bold. For the font size, I could choose anything I want to. Let's choose 36. Nice and big. And I might actually shorten that title a bit. Let's go to there. Highlight that. This here is our leading, so this is our space between lines. This one here is our kerning. It's right now not able to be edited because for kerning to edit, you need to pop your cursor in between two things of text, two characters. And then this one over here is our tracking. So, just to go a bit more in depth into those, of course you know what font size is. Tracking, like I said, it's the space between lines of text. So if I increase that, you can see our lines are getting much bigger. I'll pop that back to auto. Our kernings, I'll pop that cursor in there. If I tick that up, this kerning is the spacing between two letters. So I'll pop that back to 0. Tracking is the space between characters in words. So it's like editing the kerning all at once, but kerning is for those micro adjustments and tracking is for those macro adjustments. And pop that back to 0. This one here is our vertical scale. Over here we have our horizontal scale. So if I tick this up to say 200%, you see our text gets very tall. So I'll pop that back to 100%. Same with the horizontal scale, 200%, it gets very wide. Oops, 100%. Now this one here is our baseline shift. So I'm going to highlight a letter so we can see how that works. If I tick it up, our letter moves up. So this is changing the baseline where our letters will sit. Pop that back to 0. And then this last one here is our skew. So if I tick that, you can skew your letters. Down here we have some buttons. So this one is all caps. Now this button's great, but there isn't one for like all lowercase letters. So I recommend if you're ever needing to have a title or something in all caps, you write it out in maybe title case or sentence case, and then you use this button to make it all caps. This one here is small caps, so it makes small capital letters. I don't like this because now the thickness of our letters is very uneven. Next one we have is superscript, so I just highlighted one letter to show that one. We have subscript, and I'll turn that one off by clicking on it. Highlight my title again. Then we have underline and strike through. So lots of customization options without even cracking the surface of Adobe InDesign. I'm going to close up the character panel there, and now we're going to look at the paragraph panel. So I'll put that open. So first up, we have our alignment. So I'm going to highlight my paragraphs here. So right now it is left aligned. We can center align it, right align it, and then we have left justify, center justify, right justify, and full justify. I'm not going to ignore these last two here. This one is align towards spine and align away from spine. Because we're not doing a book with a spine, I'm going to leave that alone. I'll pop that back to align left. Down here we have an indent, so this will indent all of our text, like so. This one is a first line indent, so if we tick that up, the first line of each paragraph will be indented. Then we have the same for right indent, and last line right indent, which isn't really going to do much. And then these ones here with this little rectangle in them, and this one, these are our spacing options. So this is our space before paragraphs, this one is space after paragraphs, and then this one is space between paragraphs using the same style. Now I'm not going to go into this one here, we'll focus on space before and space after. So if you're like me And maybe when you used Microsoft Word and you're like, oh, I really don't like how close these paragraphs are together. Let me just hit enter and that will be fine. This is not a very good way of increasing your paragraph spacing, because if you need to change your paragraph spacing, maybe you change your font, maybe you change the size and now it doesn't look right, you would have to change them all, and that's a pain. So what we can do is we can highlight our paragraph and we can use our space before or space after to increase that spacing. So space before, that defaults to 1 centimeter for me, but I'll pop that to 0.4 so you can see a bit better. And that looks a bit nicer. And now with this, we can directly control this space between all of our paragraphs. I'm going to undo that. It doesn't matter which one you use, with space before or space after, it just matters that you're consistent. So I prefer to use space after because I'll have a space after set up for my titles. So let's say that one is 0.4, and then I'll have one that's set up for my paragraphs. So let's say that one's 0.2, maybe 0.3. Depending on the font size you're using, you might want to increase or decrease this. But that looks a little bit more palatable, and then it can be consistent throughout the whole thing. So, following from that, we have this option down here. Now this is a drop cap. And if I tick that up to 1, nothing's going to happen. If I tick it up to 2, you might be a little bit familiar with this. So, drop caps, as you can see here, it makes the cap the size of multiple lines. So if I highlight this one, we can increase how many lines that is if we want to. You might be familiar with this at the start of book chapters. And then this one over here changes the number of letters in that drop cap. So if I tick that up, you can see it's changing the number of characters. Now you might be a bit confused because some of my text disappeared, and we have this thing down here that says we've got 1 error, and then over here we've got this little plus. And so what this means is we have too much text for our text box, and that is overset text. And you can double click on this error over here and it tells you that you have overset text. I'm going to close that because I already know about it. Now you have 2 options for fixing this. We've actually got a lot of options to fix it. You can either reformat everything so it stays within your text frame. You could make your text frame bigger to accommodate that text. I'll just undo that. Or we can make a new text box, and this is going to be a threaded text box. So I'm going to click on this little plus here, and you can see my cursor got something added to it, and this is now our new text box. So if I click and drag, and I make that like that, you can see our excess text goes off the edge, and we no longer have that ugly plus. Instead, we've got this arrow here. And so now these text frames are threaded together. And if I hit return, I can see my text will go to that next frame. So now my text is flowing. Now you can see your text threads very easily if you want to. We can go to the View tab up here, Extras, and then Show Text Threads. And then when you click on your text box, we have this blue line that connects the 2 together. So if I was to take this text box over here, and we can make it smaller, you can see all of our text flows into that next one. Now make that to the side, and we've got some text. It's not very pretty, it's not very nicely formatted, and there are smarter ways of doing this in Adobe InDesign. We can do columns in InDesign. I'm not going to go too in depth in that. So if I hit W, now W is our shortcut for preview mode. So if I hit that, we get a print preview of what our layout looks like. If I hit W again, it brings us back into our regular view. So W, shortcut for preview mode, and W again gets us back. And we don't have to use the shortcut W if you don't want to. We can go View, screen mode, and then you can use preview. But W is much faster. So now I want this layout to look a little bit more organized. Let's add a line maybe down here somewhere. So to use our line tool, it's this one underneath the type tool, or we can hit backslash on our keyboard. So I'm going to click on that, and then I can click and drag to make a line. I can hold shift to keep it perfectly straight. And once again, it has no appearance. So we can hit D to just give it a default appearance. And to show you some line settings, I'm going to tick up the size of our stroke a bit and show you those settings that we couldn't show you with the closed shapes we had before. So, clicking on the word stroke, now we can look at our cap options. So right now this is a butt cap, please don't laugh. And then we have a round cap and a projecting cap. So round cap does what it says it's going to do. It's going to round our corners, and a projecting cap is going to go out further than our lines. So the butt cap is going to go straight to the end of where our path is, but these two will extend past it. And then we also have our start and end here. So we can do bar, we can do square, empty square, solid circle, not solid circle. We've got lots of options. Got arrow options as well. So if we say we want none on that one, and we put that back to a bit of a hard cap, and then we maybe tick down our stroke a fair bit, we've got some lovely options for our shape. Now we've got our transform settings up here, so let's go over some of those really quickly. We of course have the X and Y positioning of our shape. This is our length. Now we can't have a width and height because that's not the kind of shape it is. We have scale of it. This one is our rotation, and then this one is shear. So if I was to put that up to 45 degrees, you can see it makes my box shear. Now this one here is rotate 90 degrees clockwise. And then this one is going to be counterclockwise. This one is flip horizontal. And this one is flip vertical, which doesn't do anything because it's symmetrical. If we hit W for preview again, that's what we're looking at. To export your InDesign document as a PDF, we're going to go File and then find Export, or you can use the shortcut Command E or Control E. So I'll just click that. And now we've got Adobe PDF Print. You've got a few options here. You could also do an interactive. I prefer the print dialog here. So if I click Save, it's going to open up this PDF dialog box. Now, generally for most use cases, you'll probably only need to use the preset high quality print, maybe press quality. As you get more into InDesign, you might be customizing these features, but we're just going to click Export. And then our InDesign document will be a PDF right here. So that's how we export as a PDF in Adobe InDesign. Now you might have noticed that our image has this chain link on it here, and it looks pretty familiar to things like this chain link. But what this means is our image is linked into our InDesign document. It is not inside of the InDesign document. If I was going to save this and send it to another person, this image would not appear to be in here. It would show a preview of it, but it would be very pixelated and it would have an ugly error here. For example, if I delete this from my files, you see we get this error here. And if I go down here and I double click on this, I've got links and it says missing links. Oh no. So I'll just undo that in here, pop it back, and my link is now happy again. So this means that it's grabbing a preview from my Files app and rendering it in InDesign. So there are a couple ways to deal with this. We could embed our images, but InDesign is not a very efficient program and it doesn't really like embedded images. But I'll show you how to do that because sometimes it might be necessary. I have worked with people where we have had to embed images before. So we can go Window up here and we can find links. And you'll see we have our image here and we can make sure our image is clicked on. Go up to this menu here and go embed link. Now that chain link has gone and we now have this icon in here. So if I was to save this file and send it to another person, my image would be in there. But if they have a slow computer, that might be a fairly miserable experience for them. So we can do something called packaging our document. So first I'm going to save it. Shortcut is Control S, or we can go File and Save As, which is Control Shift S. Since I haven't saved this document before, it doesn't matter if I use Control S or Control Shift S. Now, you might have noticed potentially that we have this little asterisk in here. Now, this means our document has not been saved. And so in the Save As dialog, I'm just going to keep it as an InDesign 2024 document. Leave everything as default and click Save. And that asterisk is now gone. And so that means our document has been saved. So you've got a really quick visual way of seeing if you need to save your document. And now I'm going to package my document. So I'm going to go File and then find Package near the bottom. Now this shortcut is not much of a shortcut, but it is Control-Alt-Shift-P or Command-Option-Shift-P. So I'll click on that. We get this package dialog box where it gives us all of this information and it will also tell us what fonts that we've used and it will take those for us as well. So I'll click Package. I'm going to leave all of this as default. I'll just leave it all on. Go Package and we'll ignore this warning. We'll just go OK. And now we have our folder over here where we have links. So this will be our image that's in there. And we also have our fonts. So we have Helvetica and Minion Pro. So what I can do now is I can zip this folder up and I can send it to another person and they'll have all of the files that they need to work on the InDesign document without having any errors. So packaging is a really, really great way to share your files with someone and it makes sure that your images won't be lost when you're saving things. So you always remember, save your file and package your file. Now, one thing that I've forgotten to mention because I'm on my MacBook is that some of your images might look a bit crunchy. They might look a bit pixelated even when they shouldn't in their document. So if that happens to you, we can go up to View here. We can go to Display Performance and you might be on Typical Display. So if you swap to High Quality Display, that will make things a bit prettier. So if I go to Typical Display, you'll see my image has become a bit pixelated. Whereas if I go View, Display Performance, High Quality Display, it's nice and smooth. So that might be why. So like I said, this is only part one of a series of InDesign tutorials that I want to do, all of which will be geared towards complete beginners. So if you like that video, please like and subscribe, and hopefully I will see you again soon.